Okay, so today we're talking about the final type of transformation that we'll talk about in this class, and that's what's called a dilation. All right, and a dilation is just basically taking a shape or a figure that's graphed on the coordinate plane and making that shape bigger or smaller. All right, characteristics of a dilation is basically dilation just takes an image and makes it either bigger or smaller. It doesn't rotate, it doesn't flip or anything like that. The same basic shape is still there when it's done. It's just expanded and blown up or shrunk. Okay. A good example of a dilation in the real world would be the pupils of your eyes. Your eyes get bigger and smaller depending on the amount of light that's present in the room or wherever you're at. So that's an example of a dilation. A dilation makes things expands or shrinks things. Okay. With dilations, and when we get into actually doing dilations, we get into what's called a scale factor. All right, and a scale factor is basically just the number that the original coordinates are multiplied by. So if I have a shape that's graphed in the coordinate plane, I'm going to pull those coordinates and multiply those coordinates by some number, and that will expand or shrink the figure. All right. The characteristics of a scale factor are that it basically is going to be some sort of decimal or fraction. It's not going to be, or it can be a whole number, but it also can be a decimal or a fraction. So what we're talking about when we have a decimal or a fraction might be something where we're shrinking something and you multiply the coordinates by like 0.5 or 0.75 or any fraction. Anything like that will shrink the thing. It'll shrink the figure, but it can also expand. So you could also have something like 1.5 or 2 or 5. All right, if you want to make the image really big. So with the scale factor, here's some rules for the number that scale factor. If the scale factor is greater than 1, then it's going to make the image bigger. All right, so if you multiply the coordinates by any number that's bigger than 1, it will be an expansion. It's going to make your image bigger. If you multiply it by something that's less than 1, it's going to make your image smaller. All right, and if your scale factor is 1, then it's going to stay the same, which makes sense. All right. So the steps, all right, when we get into doing dilations, which we're going to do here in the next video, the steps to perform these dilations are written here. Note here in red, this is very important. These steps only work if you're rotating about the origin. Or if you're making a dilation around the origin. All right, so if the dilation is around any other point than the origin, then we have a different process, and we'll talk about that later. All right, so the steps to perform a dilation are right here. The first step is basically to figure out what the coordinates are of the original figure. So odds are they'll either give you the coordinates and you can work with those, or they'll give you a graph of the figure and you're going to have to pull the coordinates from the graph. All right, so get the original coordinates, and then step 2 basically is to multiply each of those coordinates by the scale factor, and that is both the x and the y coordinate. Okay, and then step 3 is not something you do every time, but it is something you'll probably have to do most of the time, and that's basically once you have your new coordinates, your transformed image, you're going to graph the new figure. All right, so that's a little bit about dilations. Take some time to copy this into your notebook. Make sure you understand it, and if you have any questions, bring them to class.